Morning, everyone. I think it's quite a change to have an in-person event in comparison to a lot of the webinars that we've been running over the last 2 years. So good to interact with people. I think some of our guests have driven quite far, going into Africa. So some of them said, well, let's stay in pajamas and attend online, while others jumped in their vehicles to come and see us. And thank you for that. We really appreciate that. But I think maybe just to go back a few years ago, I stood in front of the audience probably just pre-COVID. And a lot of the discussions that we had was much different to what we're discussing today in terms of the topics. A lot of legislation that we see today wasn't really around, and the analysts came together. ICT was still in a silo, a big black pit of money where people constantly throw investments into, and business saw very little return on that. And unfortunately, where we find ourselves today, or rather fortunately, is we're no longer in the siloed organization. We're now working collaboratively between ICT and business. But still today, what we tend to forget is there's an aspect of security. You know, we've digitally transformed quite rapidly. I don't think I need to mention what that means in terms of business models changing and the reliance on ICT. But the gist of it is, there has been a huge paradigm shift, and that paradigm shift has meant that technology is on the forefront of what businesses need to drive their business models, irrespective of what that business model means. And today, you know, as a consumer of services in the industry, I probably won't want to engage or interact with a retailer unless they've got an online presence. I mean, I look at a lot of consumers, the first thing they do is again look at specials online at a very minimal, let's call it, viewpoint before they actually go and consume online. And if we have a look at some of the stats, it's quite scary. Woolies announced yesterday that they spent over R1 billion on e-commerce. I mean, R1 billion is not sort of pocket change. And I think with some of our clients that are present here today, also in the retail space, they've gone through some huge investments, trying to catch up to Black Friday and augment some of their technology aspects. And you can well imagine, if these systems become unavailable and business can't operate, what does that actually mean from a revenue loss point of view? And if we had this conversation a couple of months ago and we talked about revenue and availability, we probably talked about infrastructure and architecture and the designs around that and what that actually meant for you. But I think those topics are slowly fading away, because by virtue of design, virtue of the way cloud services are provided today, that's sort of seen as a utility-based service, as an afterthought. Where we're shifting our focus on is how do we take data and monetize information. And there's different forms of monetizing information. And with the monetization aspects of data comes a massive concern with security. Because just as data is as valuable to you as an organization and to your end customers, so is that data also available and as valuable to cyber criminals. And we've seen a huge rise, specifically in South Africa and other global entities, where ransomware has become a norm. You know, it's almost like the olden days where you go to a country and they kidnap you and then they keep you ransom and then you've got to pay. I mean, that sort of thing's happening constantly with data. I'm not going to steal the thunder of the other speakers today, but very interesting topics that we're going to be discussing around accountability. So gone are the days where you can basically just get breached and think, okay, the information's gone and somebody's going to get away with that. Yes, no network is 100% safe. And strangely enough, I saw someone from government the other day saying they're buying a hack-proof system. And I was like, okay, what is a hack-proof system? And people talk about zero trust and all these fancy words that are thrown around. But in reality, we all know at some point you will be breached. But having the correct controls in place is what is important. When the regulator comes and knocks on your door and says, what have you done and what have you put in place from an accountability point of view to prove that you had some sort of control in place to ensure that you can prove that at some point you were preventing that breach or trying to prevent that breach, and I think that's more important. I opened by giving you a bit of a spiel on where we were previously. What I need to take you through and mention, and I had a lot of questions from the audience when they slowly came in this morning, is what is this CoCre8 organization all about? It seems like a new name. We haven't really heard of the company. But in essence, we used to be known as Fujitsu South Africa. We've been in operation throughout the African region for the last 3 decades. We were presented with a lovely opportunity just before lockdown, and that was to localize the entity 100%. So we previously had a 25% BBBE shareholding through a local organization, and we took the option to increase that to 100%. So what that means today is, yes, we're locally owned as an entity, but it also provides us with an opportunity to customize and co-create solutions with our partners and customers alike. Because with this paradigm shift, unfortunately, no one has the answers to all the problems. It needs to be a collaboration and a co-creation and co-invention exercise where we all get together and the experts and customers alike come together and create solutions. As service providers, yes, we've got solutions, but as end customers, you know your business the best. And by bringing the two worlds together, we can create something meaningful. I'm just going to play a small video just to give you some context in terms of the new company. And then I'll take you through some of the topics of discussion.
We are the future today. We are CoCre8, the exclusive Fujitsu OEM representative for Africa. We connect potential to infinite possibility. We co-create, co-design, co-invent, co-produce world-class technology solutions powered by ingenuity and teamwork. We are no ordinary company. We're the catalyst for change, delivering more than we promise, fusing future-focused thinking, challenging today, innovating for tomorrow, building for the future now. We are empowering a nation and a continent, not just enlightened, inspired, not just excellent, exceptional, always in partnership. CoCre8 Technology Solutions.
So I think very interestingly, knowing us previously as Fujitsu, people think of us as a hardware vendor selling laptops through macro or dropping pieces of tin in your data center. But there has been a shift, and when we talk about the shift, we look at how do we provide solutions across the entire ecosystem. So from the edge to the core to the cloud. We can't run away from the fact that there's been a massive investment from the big hyperscalers in this country. And the shift has moved away from, let's take your stuff that you're currently running in your data center and put it somewhere else. It's moved towards how do you leverage technology and software specifically to drive business outcomes. So the old lift and shift approach is gone, and there's an ecosystem that's come into play, and that's where we start looking at hybrid cloud. And there's values and pockets of things that fit different customers. And depending on your maturity and your journey, there's a fit for you in terms of what technologies you need to adopt. We've looked at a best of breed, and in terms of what we feel in terms of the market, we've positioned that to add value to you wherever you are on your journey. Just some highlights. So with the transformation, we are a level 1 BBBE organization. We're probably one of the very few OEMs that also provide service offerings. So service offerings means anything from consultancy in terms of architecture, so getting our specialists to come and sit down with you, understand your business strategic direction, and giving you advisory services around how portfolio can actually benefit your journey or take you on a journey to transform. More importantly, we've seen with the graduates, especially the millennials, they think that this legacy world, and I probably don't come from the mainframe world because I'm probably too young for that age, but we do have some of our colleagues that come from that age. When I was in the industry, I was told mainframes are technology and everything was built around this and it's resilient, and unfortunately I haven't touched the mainframe in my entire career. I actually built it from an x86, let's call it base, or an open systems base. But I feel like I've become like those mainframe guys now, because the newer generations, they call them the AMA 2000s, are not investing in infrastructure related services. They've got this dream that they're going to monetize some application and they're going to become the richest person in the world, and everybody's going down that career path. We're fortunate to say that we're one of very few organizations that still have retained those skills at scale. So we do provide the basics between bridging the legacy and the modern world, which we're quite proud of. Just in terms of our footprint, so yes, we are still resident across Africa. As I mentioned, we've been in business for 3 decades. So we do provide all our services from a portfolio point of view in the countries listed on the map. Just as a reminder, in terms of this business shift, so there has been something called VUCA that has disrupted this industry. And that's, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity that has driven this approach that I mentioned, where ICT and business have sort of become one. And IT members are now sitting on excos, they're sitting on boards, and they're driving this whole strategic direction. But what does that actually mean? So when we talk to you about digital transformation, we're not coming to you and saying, here's a solution, go and buy an ERP system or buy an analytics tool or buy something that's going to fit into your technology landscape. We're actually saying to you that, and maybe this is with most customers, a starting point, let's have a conversation, sit down and understand from a business point of view, what are you actually trying to achieve? And then understand how technology can enable that. And that is what we see as digital transformation. I just want to recap on the journey. I think these are also discussion points that we've had over the last couple of years. So we know things have evolved, and I mentioned open systems, so we're going back to the 1990s to 2005, where technology was sort of deployed in a slow monolithic approach. You went through a procurement cycle, you bought a bunch of infrastructure, put it in a data center, and you had different teams of people. Application developers were sort of completely separate from infrastructure people, your BAs were separate, your business operations people were separated, and you had a big spaghetti, and hopefully you had a strong program and project management team that brought all of these things together, and you had an outcome in terms of delivering some sort of business app. And it was seen more as a support system to your business rather than an integral part of your business. The rise of virtualization came about, and that was sort of the foundation of what we see as cloud today. So a lot of your hyperscale vendors were part of this journey to develop some sort of virtualization technology. So that brought about a tighter consolidation and integration of IT slowly to business. But the application world still didn't sort of fuse the infrastructure. There was still this thing where business was agile and they needed stuff up and running very quickly because there was a project that could drive a specific business outcome, but ICT didn't understand that world. They were like, oh, who's this nag knocking on my door? The CEO wants this tool. And this whole shadow IT concept started developing, where ICT was continuously shadowing business and not the other way around. And where we see ourselves now with the rise of cloud, we talk about re-platforming applications, cloud-native applications, leveraging native services, which talks directly to business. However, this has become a conundrum where we talk about DevOps, we talk about Agile, There's terms used like sprints. So things are developed in an iterative way to derive immediate value. But in all of this stuff, security wasn't mentioned. Okay. So you're saying, well, the cloud providers have invested as a platform where security is adopted by design and not as an afterthought. So there's this world of, is my security team that I've got now still relevant in the world that I am in today, because my risk and exposure is much bigger than what it was before, because things are slowly but surely driven to more online-based services, and that is where this whole cloud-based thing comes in. If you think about an analogy, especially with security, your old security teams throughout all of these silos were traditional security people. Let's go and buy an antivirus package and install that, and we're secure. We've got a firewall at the perimeter, and our organization is secure. We've got all of these technology elements from a security point of view. But in reality, the dark web and hackers that are out there have become far more advanced, and hacks have become far more complicated than what traditional technologies can keep up with today. And then most companies have started thinking, okay, how do we address that? So this role of the Chief Information Security Officer has sort of come to the fore. But what is that role? What individual needs to be put into that role? Is it a very technical person that's a hacker that can go to conferences and showcase his skills and steal your information? And by the way, we're not going to showcase any messages on your smartphones, even though we have technology to intercept your communications. But things have become that complicated. And I think, as you're going to see through illustrations today with some of the demos, hacking has gone far beyond the point where our system's patched because we have known vulnerabilities. It has gone to a point where we actually need to look at the code. There's stuff called 0 days, so keep that in mind, things that you've never picked up before. But just to end off, so I mentioned we've built an ecosystem from the edge to the core to the cloud. We've got a lot of partnerships. I'm not going to touch on all of these things. But irrespective of whether you're still on-prem in your own data center, going co-located, or into a hyperscaler, what makes our magic, or the ingredients that makes all of this possible, is our partnership with VMware, Fujitsu, and NetApp. They're all integrated into your hyperscalers. And our philosophy is to prevent vendor lock-in from a cloud point of view. So when you adopt these technologies, it gives you flexibility to move your workloads into whatever cloud you deem fit for purpose at that point for whatever reasons, whether that's data sovereignty, whether that's cost drivers, whatever that might be, we allow you to do that. And more importantly is making sure that you're compliant throughout that entire journey. This is where NetApp adds enormous value in terms of making sure that you understand what data sits where, in what cloud, and what has happened to that information. There's also been a shift in terms of moving from capital-based expenditure to operational-based expenditure. A lot of companies don't want to spend their CapEx on technology necessarily because they don't see it as a core part of their business. And that is where traditional cloud service offerings become quite palatable, because customers are saying, well, we pay for what we use, but not everybody's ready to go full on cloud. So there are alternatives. There's localized cloud providers that do offer a similar service at different cost points, and you pay for what you use. And there's also models where you can deploy an OpEx-based consumption model in your own data center. And that is what we have on offer and we can offer you today. But the focus of the discussion in terms of this specific topic will be on two of the security elements we want to look at, in terms of the complex hacks that we see today and the gap that needs to be bridged between what we call traditional penetration testing as well as vulnerability assessments, and then also visibility into assets.